Hello everyone, once again welcome to my video where I take you through climate change risk reduction strategies, which is also a continuation of the previous videos that I've made where I took you through climate change risk assessment and management strategies, of course, and the identification of risk reduction strategies. Now in this particular video, I will take you through the different potential climate change risk reduction strategies. My name is John Sekajugo. I'm a lecturer at Mountains of the Moon University in the Faculty of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, the Department of Environment, Natural Resources and Tourism. Of course, you can do all different, you can understand climate change, you can do risk assessments and vulnerability assessments and studies, you can engage everyone, but if you don't come up with potential and good risk reduction strategies and be able to address these risks, then you will have done nothing. The whole essence of doing the assessments, of doing all those studies, is to be able to come up with very good climate change risk reduction strategies. Strategies that can be able, that are implementable, that can be used by the societies, by the communities to reduce the risk imposed by climate change hazards. And therefore, in this particular video, we are going to discuss these climate change risk reduction strategies that can be employed, of course, either at community level or at national level to be able to address climate change risks. Climate change risk reduction, of course, as we all know, is part of the risk management, where efforts are systematically made and put in place to reduce the potential loss due to climate change. Of course, this can include reducing exposure, relocating to safer areas, of course, leaving the susceptible zone. For example, if you are landslides, leaving the very highland areas, leaving the steep slopes, leaving the riverbanks and all that. Okay, reducing exposure, making sure people do not go in the prone areas. Okay, and this includes sometimes you have laws and policies that govern this. For example, in Uganda, where I know very well, we have national environment management policy and laws that define what should be done where, that even prohibit settling and constructing in certain zones from the river. They define which river should have which particular buffer area. So limiting exposure is one risk reduction strategy, okay? But also it can include building resilience. Of course, through livelihood improvement, it could be through community empowerment, it could be through developing coping mechanisms. You can say, okay, we are in this area. Some people, for example, when I'm in the field, sometimes doing some assessments on climate related aspects, I meet people who say, for me, this is the only land I have. My grandfather left me here, my father left me here, so this is the only land I have nowhere to go. And somebody feels has nowhere to go, will remain in that particular risk area. So you can decide to build the capacity of that particular person or that particular area to withstand the shocks. So you build the resilience of that particular person. And this can include either improving the livelihood, diversifying the income levels. If, for example, a community is dependent only on agriculture, on smallholder farming, and that particular community is in an area that is prone to droughts, so you would think of diversifying the income generating activities so that people are able to have other sources of livelihood. That's part of resilience building. Empowering communities economically, making sure that people are able to work and get resources and money. Sometimes I see some of our policymakers and other people, thinking of giving people money, distributing people money, or even sometimes responding by giving them items and everything. This is not enough. That is just for rescue and making people to have something to eat at that particular moment. But we may need to have systems that are aimed at, and deliberate efforts that are aimed at building the resilience of these exposed communities, empowering them economically, okay, financially, and of course building systems like roads and that really withstand the climate shocks. This can also include, of course, developing early warning systems to ensure that exposed elements are warned beforehand to prepare and leave the unsafe zones early enough before, of course, the occurrence of these climate related hazards that are disastrous and are very impactful. But of course, like I said, building these early warning systems is not a one-time event. You must have gone through, of course, the assessment, the analysis of the climate, the magnitude of the hazards, when are they likely to occur, where are they likely to occur, and then be able to build a robust early warning system. These may include, of course, having monitoring stations. They may include, of course, understanding the river flow dynamics. For example, if it is for floods, know where the river is likely to occur, what is the flood extent and everything, and then be able to develop a robust early warning system. So all these can be risk reduction strategies. When you are able to warn people beforehand and say, look, this rain and all this is hard, in the next 3 days it is likely to flood, and therefore people are able to vacate the unsafe zones, of course. Okay, of course, for example, here in Uganda, sometimes Uganda National Meteorological Authority tries to release bulletins and showing certain areas where the rainfall is likely to be above normal, and therefore warning people in islands to be very alert due to the likely occurrence of landslides and floods. So such things need to be built further, strengthened, and be able to give really robust and very accurate warnings as part of the risk reduction strategy. So climate change effects are different, and they affect, of course, differently in different sectors. So you don't have the same impacts for the different sectors. You don't have the same level of damage for different exposed elements. So it affects different sectors differently. And although, of course, integrated approaches in reducing risk are preferred, certain sectors may need specific sector-specific strategies to tackle the climate change risks. So you may not need to go full swing and use one strategy for everything. While some integrated approach can, of course, be used in 2 or 3 different sectors, certain sectors require sector-specific risk reduction strategies. Also, certain landscapes require landscape-specific risk reduction strategies, and therefore we need to understand this. And that's why it is very important, like I said in my previous video, to do the assessments very well, understand the nature of the exposed elements, and be able to develop risk reduction strategies that are sector specific, that are landscape specific, that are country specific, that are region specific. Okay, it is very important to understand these differences and be able not to make mistakes, because while a certain risk reduction strategy may work in one specific sector, it may not work in the other. While it may work in one landscape, it may not work in the other landscape. And because of this, and to understand this further, I want to leave you with a discussion on different aspects. I want you to discuss in whatever with your peers and others the present, of course, existing and potential risk reduction strategies in the various sectors, of course, including, of course, the agriculture and rural development sector. So you discuss the existing and potential risk reduction strategies in the agriculture and rural development sector. The existing, it could be in your own community, it could be in your own district, it could be in your country, Uganda, it could be in a different country. Okay? You discuss or understand the present or the existing and potential risk reduction strategies in the water and environment sector. Look at the existing and potential climate change risk reduction strategies in the transport sector. And also, lastly, look at the potential and the present or existing risk reduction strategies in the health sector. When you do that, I presume by the time you finish that, you have understood different risk reduction strategies in different sector, and which ones can be sector specific, but also which ones can cut across. So here, let us also look at climate change adaptation and mitigation in agroecological systems. Okay? Because we know farming and agriculture is the backbone of most African countries, but also it's one of the biggest contributors to climate change, but also it can be used as a sector where we can do climate change mitigation adaptation. So let us look at climate change adaptation and mitigation in the agroecological sector, in the agroecological systems. So we all know that these systems are largely depend on climate variables, especially temperature and rainfall, and the predicted changes in the global temperatures and rainfall regimes of course, amidst the human and environmental interferences, will greatly affect the global water cycle and hence affect more the agroecological systems. So improvements in these agricultural systems that maintain, of course, monoculture approaches are likely not to give us good results. So we require implementation of measures that build the resilience of farming communities, of course, such as agroforestry. We have things like polyculture, people have talked about mixed farming initiatives, of course, coupled with soil and water conservation techniques. We need these different approaches and methods and techniques to be able to address issues of climate change, but also build the resilience of these farming systems to climate change shocks. Okay, so these are several, and here agroecology, of course, can be looked at different ways. Of course, it is a research-based field of study that employs holistic approaches in analyzing agroecosystems and food systems, but also it's a pool of practices and principles, okay, that aim at building the resilience and sustainability of farming systems, of course, while maintaining the societal integrity and culture and norms. Okay, it can be a socio-political movement, as many other authors have said, which focus on the use of agroecology to find ways of looking at agriculture to of course, to involve processing, distribution, and consumption of food, society, and nature systems. So agroecology is increasingly being seen as one integrated field that can be used to solve many climate-related challenges. Okay, build agroecological systems, that are resilient, that are strong enough to withstand climate shocks. Okay, so agricultural systems are looked as one of the major contributors of course, of greenhouse gases emissions into the atmosphere. But at the same time, climate change is and will, even in the future, affect greatly the productivity and output from agricultural investments. Okay, so agroecological practices and principles provide us or give us new ways of enhancing productivity on farmlands while contributing to climate change mitigation. It provides or gives us efficient ways of managing and processing pastures, life cycle approach of planning and managing agrosystems that reduce greenhouse gases. And here in this table, I outline a few of them, which include incorporating shade, okay, so things that retain soil moisture in the soil, that enhance infiltration, of course, things that enhance carbon sequestration, carbon storage, that modify the microclimate of gardens, and other things that improve, of course, productivity, but also improve the stability of slopes to reduce landslides and damages. So incorporating shade, vegetation and trees in farmlands is very important. Going to the agroecosystems, of course, crop diversification, okay, as the other crop, of course, livelihood improvement and diversification, as many other ways. So there are several approaches and methods and practices that I propose in this table. And I want to end this by leaving you with an assignment that is related to, of course, determining and mentioning and explaining the different climate change adaptation and mitigation activities practiced in your own country. Here I say Uganda, but could be in your own country, in your district, in your own community. And also be able to explain to what extent have the above activities contributed to your country's journey of green growth, and identifying and explaining climate change mitigation and adaptation bottlenecks that are existing in Uganda. It could be in your own country, it could be in your own district, it could be in your own society. So I want to end this at this. I will continue from here in my next video. I encourage you to look up to it and be able also to continue learning with me and understanding the different aspects of climate change risks management and the different climate change risk reduction strategies. Thank you very much.